Okay, so another quick video. I think it's going to be a quick video. We'll see. Kind of continuing along the subject of the opposition and inversion. There's something that I noticed a while ago that I find to be kind of mind-blowing. And I would really love to speak with someone who knows a bit more about chemistry. Because if we take a look at fire and water, which is in the primary axis here in the postnatal and in the secondary axis in the prenatal. So here's fire, here's water, and in the postnatal we have fire above, water below. They're obviously opposite to each other. But what is water? Well, we have a single oxygen atom and two hydrogens. So what do we have here? Well, we have a single yang line and two yins. So what if we say that oxygen is yang and the hydrogen is yin? Well, then what does fire mean? Well, isn't it interesting that oxygen is the atmosphere necessary and that the most ideal fuel is hydrogen? That strikes me as being significant. But I don't really know exactly why or how. It's one of the reasons why I'm making this video. I would love to discuss this with someone. Is there a way in which these other trigrams suggest something of a similar nature? And it strikes me as interesting that the periodic table of the elements was originally conceived of and organized on the basis of octaves, because the between the noble gases, where all of the that don't interact. That's why they're called noble. They stand apart, so they're not inclined to participate in chemical reactions, although they can be forced to do so, apparently. Between that, there are 7 others on some basic level. Right? Again, I'm not a chemist, and I actually did very poorly in chemistry in high school, so it's the kind of thing that I don't have a lot of familiarity with, but it strikes me as being really interesting that we have those two correspondences built into the trigram here. Why is it that we would have a correspondence on a atom basis, atomic basis, elemental basis, where water turns out to have a structure that we can directly link to this trigram, oxygen with 2 hydrogens, and that fire just turns out to be something where the inversion of water, the opposite of water, I'm going to say. I'm afraid I'm going to use inversion and opposite inconsistently, so I need to get control over my language here. And I'm not really sure exactly which is the best term. Should it be opposite for the trigrams that have yin turning into yang and vice versa? I think probably that makes more sense than inversion implies turning it upside down. But, I could see a case being made either way. But for now, I'm going to say opposition is when you're flipping the yin and yangs, and inversion is when you're turning the trigram upside down. So here we have this opposite form that also happens to correspond to a basic fact about fire on an elemental basis. Hydrogen is the ideal fuel. Oxygen is the necessary environment in order to have burning. So here's the real question. Can we apply the concept of time to the elements, is there some way in which water structurally has attention placed on the present, whereas the past and future are not being paid attention to? Well, when we think about the way water behaves and how the atoms of water interact, we could say that's basically true, that on some level the activity is not really happening on the bond level. The hydrogen bonds are very, very weak, and so water kind of very loosely holds together. So the focus of attention, you could say, is sort of on the oxygen being held within that structure. And I know that this is a little crazy and I'm just kind of shooting for whatever little tidbits I can get from the ether here. And likewise, you could say fire, in some respects, the attention is on the hydrogen because it gets consumed, right? That's what happens to a fuel. A fuel is the thing that burns. So it's the focus of attention. That might be about as far as I can go with this. But the question of time, of course. Now, is there something about fire where the present is not being held to? And well, obviously that's true. Fire is incredibly transformative. Whatever's presently there is not going to be there in the next instant. Right? So is fire an effort to connect past and future? Well, when you think about metabolism, right, what we do in order to live another day, in order for the past, which is our physical being, the thing that has been existing and we have a history with, for that thing to go into the future, it requires that we metabolize, we break down. It's basically kind of a form of burning, right? It's a slow burn. So we consume fuels to take this form, which is it's an object in memory, you could say, and transport it into the future. So when things are burning, what is it that's trying to be maintained? What are we clinging to? Yeah, there is this kind of biblical concept of that the world will first be destroyed by water, so you had the Great Flood, and will then later be destroyed by fire. So if we think of that poetically in these terms, maybe initially it's destroyed by sensory indulgence, and later it's destroyed by the formation of a clinging to an image. Does that seem to ring true? Because in many respects, we live in the time of idols, right? American Idol. The development of the spectacle, which moved beyond the mere representation into animated forms, ever more lifelike, created a never-ending stream of images to cling to. And so, in more than one way, we're living in a time of fire. And so, it seems that it makes sense on a poetic level that the world would start to burn, that this kind of global warming aspect would be a big issue for a species consumed with living forever, with trying to take itself and transport itself into the future. So, obviously all of this would be occurring within the context of the postnatal, where the image is the goal. The idea of being able to persevere into the future indefinitely and that our idols will live on in memory forever. So it's like going down in history. Even people who are like guitar heroes or something along those lines, right? Movie stars, Marilyn Monroe and James Dean will live in the memory of humanity forever, right? Rock and roll will never die, right? So we're living in a time of fire. And it's based upon water. Now, why is it based upon water? Because it all has to do with sensation. Sense-oriented. We're continually trying to find the pleasant sensation and trying to avoid the unpleasant sensation. And so we develop strategies, right, to try to achieve the desired goal. But of course, the desired goal is held in mind. It's an image that we're chasing after based upon some kind of an experience that we previously had and which we hold in memory. So up here, well, actually in this case, the top line is on the inside, right? Because the future's out there somewhere. We're just trying to figure out how to grab it. So we're holding an idea of that sensation that we either want to achieve or avoid, right? Could be either one, positive or negative. So we're holding to that image and trying to either bring it about or avoid it in the future. We're putting our attention into the future, whether that means repeating or avoiding. So there's an interesting concept in Taoism that is related to the inversion. So one of the ways of achieving liberation from the postnatal is to invert the whole arrangement. In other words, take fire, place it down where water is. Take water and put it up where fire is, so that the fire is subservient to the water. And this is considered a more natural arrangement. So one way of thinking of it on a physical level is when fire is above a pot of water, it can't heat the water. And that, on some level, that's what we see happening within the body. Under normal circumstances where things are allowed to run their so-called natural course, we could say like a thermodynamic process where energy is being converted from a usable to unusable state. It's kind of just being wasted. Then the heat tends to rise up and the water tends to descend. In other words, they disintegrate. They don't interact. And so what you get is living in your head, and you get edema in the feet. So the disharmony. And so the solution is considered an inversion, a process of inversion, where you take that heat of the mind and you place it down into the belly, which is the cauldron where the waters are doing their thing. And so you get out of the head and you send the mind downward and you sit inside of the sensation without allowing the thoughts to rise up. And so the fire becomes a very particular purpose. It's for heating the waters, for stimulating the movement and creating, I'm going to put quotes around it, steam, right? For energizing the waters and allowing the waters to permeate throughout. And that's the basic kind of alchemy of Taoist thinking. It's the meditation. It has to do with where you're placing the mind. And so the top and bottom lines, past and future, instead of being applied to a desired object, right? What they do is they get converted into a prenatal type of fire where they are serving the interests of heaven. So by forgetting about the desired image and applying attention in past and future to the goal of the Tao, of God, of the divine plan, which is beyond our individual knowing, outside of our ego, something that we can't be attached to because we don't even know what it is, right? So we humble ourselves and quiet and find that way of focusing the mind to settle in sensation until the present is all that's there, and then we're able to empty the present. There's a number of very interesting implications to this. So when you're meditating, you can sit, and typically people will experience monkey mind, right? So it's sort of you're battling a prenatal mind. It keeps trying to rise to the top, right? So the concept is that you invert it. By inverting it, it becomes subservient, and you're placing more of your emphasis on pure sensation. But of course, pure sensation has a, how shall we say it, an inherent bias as well, because you're the one sensing it. So it's still individuated, separated ego. It's still a relative type of experience. And so the idea is that one would empty the container of all association with experience, or I mean, that might be a good way to say it, where the riding the horse of experience, you get off the horse and see experience as if you were watching it on a screen, not so much that it's happening to you. That's the state of mind implied by earth. And it's within the context of this emptiness that that true realization occurs, I guess. That might be the way to put it. You know, I can't say that I've spent a lot of time there, but I do have some sense of it. And certainly when you get there, it's different. It's not the ordinary round and around the mind goes, monkey mind, out of control, absorption and sensation type of thing. When that level of equanimity has been established, an entirely different set of things. It's hard to even say that they occur, but they do. But on another level, I know that one of the things that's often mentioned is that when things occur, if you notice them, then you lost it. So in a certain sense, they don't occur. Because every single thing that arises within there is just a temptation to leave that actual state of receptivity. So it's getting super comfortable with not knowing, getting super comfortable with being subject to reality without any effort to interpret or filter. Anyway, I know that's a big chunk of things and a little bit out there, and but it is precisely what I have in mind when I look at these things. This is what it suggests, and in attempting practices along these lines, it seems to bear itself out. Some interesting relations. At any rate, I will continue to try to post more regularly, and I look forward to hearing from anyone who finds this interesting. If you want to subscribe to the channel or post it to your social media or anything along those lines to see if there's just a few other individuals out there in the cosmos who find this kind of thing interesting, that would be much appreciated. And if you do feel like throwing a few shekels my way to encourage continued efforts along these lines, patreon.com/TaijiReality, TaijiReality, just like the channel says. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for considering. And we'll catch you the next time. Adios.